welcome to our genealogy video. We're going to discuss this book. Now, it's funny. Nobody filled it out, but somebody wrote their husband, their children, and their parents. But it's so faded. That it's hard to read. And these people weren't young either. They were born in 43 and 45, so they're in their 70s. Actually, I'm born 43, is 80 this year. Now, I had to skip over some stuff because I'm not married. Unfortunately, some of my stuff got, as I mentioned in my daily video, some of my stuff that I wrote in here got smudged. You can see the ink on the side of my hand because I'm left-handed. And unfortunately, when you're left-handed, you tend to write and go through what you write instead of write and go past it if you're right-handed. So I don't have any pictures in here yet or anything. My nickname's Punky, thus the name of this channel, Gigi, and Butterball. I was born at Worcester City Hospital at 1:32 a.m. on August 4th, 1974. Let's see. Mom was the neighborhood mom, and Dad was, in quotes, and he used to say this himself, softer than a sneaker full of beep. Yeah. Let's see. Favorite toys, animals, all sorts of things. Teachers, friends at school. First date, 8th grade dinner dance. Favorite singer, Carmen. Let's see. Favorite vacation spots, Maine and upstate New York. And then this is if I had a husband, if I got married, if I had children. Okay, this is my mom. My mom was Ella Christine, and when she got older, like college age, she went by Chris for Christine, for her middle name, because she hated her first name. In fact, that's how my father met her, as Chris. And she told him, she said, I want my daughter to know, I want my children to know my name, so I'm going to start using Ella. And so she used Ella. My father was always Willie, even though his name was Robert. Which, did I remember to write that under him? Yep, I did. She was born July 23rd, 1954, in Lewiston, Maine. She grew up in Livermore Falls. She had cows, she had Blackie the dog, she had a bunny named Thumper. Actually, she had bunnies, and one was named Thumper. Her favorite teacher, I would say, was Mrs. Fields. Her postgraduate studies, accounting certificates, Lotus 123. Her first job was working at high school. She worked in the office, and then she worked with janitorial. First impression of my father. I'm not sure she liked him. I could be wrong. Honeymoon memories, none. They didn't have a honeymoon. First home together, they lived in Manchog. She enjoyed genealogy and writing poetry. And her siblings were Barbara, Elizabeth, Edith, John Dale, Susan, and Merle. I say John Dale, even though his name was John Dale. Because we called him Uncle Dale. Still call him Uncle Dale. That's why when I was a kid, I remember my aunt and the kids, well, her kids calling him John. And I asked my mother about it. And that's when she told me. She said, his name is John Dale. I don't know why they call him John, though, because he's always been Dale or Day-Day since we were kids. He's never been called John, because my grandfather was John. And, excuse me, and the kids, my cousins, Bobby, which is a female, Bobby Joe, Everett Tiger, which is Glendon Jr., those are Auntie Barbara's. Auntie Elizabeth had Brianna and Travis. Auntie Edie has a stepson, Norman. Uncle Dale has a son, John Jr., or Johnny. Aunt Susan has a daughter and 2 sons. And Uncle Merle does not. Let's see. Then there's Dad. He was born in Hartford, Connecticut, April 9th, 1944, Easter Sunday. Distinguishing features: clubfoot. Best friend, Bob Prunier. Grew up in Manchog, loved fishing, had a dog. Most significant childhood memory, going to Connecticut in summers. Bob Prunier and the Kibbe boys. I wrote Skip, but Skip, Ronnie, you know. His first job was was a paper route. How he proposed to my mother. Well, according to both of my parents, they were sitting in the bar and people were asking them, are you getting married and stuff like that. And he just looked at her and said, hey, you want to get married? And she said, sure. That was it. Hey, you want to? That's funny. Favorite sports? Hockey. That's funny because, oh no, those are, that's golf. That's funny because he liked golf too. There are golf clubs here. Let's see. Memorable events and achievements. He went to the 1964 World's Fair in New York. That was something he loved to talk about. His siblings were David T. July 11th, 1947. He had Lisa, Renee, David, and Dennis with his first wife. With his second wife, he had Sabrina and Jenny May. And of course, no kids with his third wife because they're both ancient. Sorry, Uncle. Sorry, Auntie, but the guys are 75 and 80 years old. Or 76 and 81 this year. It's funny because my aunt will say, every year they got to remind me how old I am because she was born December 7th, 1941. So every year they get to remind her how old she is because of the day she was born, Pearl Harbor Day, you know? That's so funny. Uncle Richard, May 18th, 1949. He had Richie Paul. Aunt Barbara, she had Lisa, Kenny, and Ray. I believe she was born in 1937. Aunt Teresa, I believe, was born in like 1939 or 40. She had Normandy. And Aunt Florence, she had Cheryl, Elton Jr., and Linda Jean. I don't have a bunch of brothers and sisters, so I just have my sister Susan. She was born in November. Her husband's name is Steele. They live in Shrewsbury, Massachusetts, and have 2 daughters. Okay, my maternal grandmother Lita Pauline Cox. Distinguishing features to me are gorgeous white hair. Born in Livermore Falls, or childhood home was Livermore Falls, Maine. I think she enjoyed reading and baking. I don't think she ever had a job. How did she meet my grandfather? She rented a home from him. Their first home together was in Fayette, Maine, the home that she rented from him. When they got together, he just moved in there. I think her favorite hobby was reading. They took a car trip to every New England state. So that would be the memorable journey. And she had for siblings Ronald, who had Heidi. She had Mayvilla, who went by her middle name Maud. She had 7 children. I'm probably going to miss some. I didn't write them all down because I didn't want to miss any. She had Larry, Linda, Molly, Sherry, Sheila, Darlene. I'm missing one. Sorry, I'm missing one. And Uncle Frank had Sue, Michael, and I can't remember the other boy's name. Then there was Uncle Junior, who was Edson. They called him Junior, but he had a different middle name from his dad, so he technically wasn't a junior. He didn't have any children. He was gay. Not ashamed to say that now. Back then, he was literally run out of town on a rail because, God forbid, he was gay. But anyway, and Kenny, who died as a baby. I believe there was also a girl who died as a baby, but I only saw that information once. Now, my maternal grandfather, I had to do this a little differently. What I did was I put John Schmidt and Charles Mitchell, because to me they're both my grandfather. John Schmidt was the grandfather who loved me, who spoiled me the best he could, considering he was a poor elderly man, who I loved. He was my grandpa. Charles Mitchell was my mother's biological father, and I'm sure he would have loved me too. So John Schmidt was from Fayette, Maine, and Charles Mitchell was from Turner. John Schmidt was very tall, like 6'6", I believe, and he was German, pure German. Let's put it this way. His last name was Schmidt. His mother's last name was Schultz. His grandparents on both sides came straight from Germany. Yeah, German. Yet he fought for us in World War II. And Charles Mitchell had huge hands. These are distinguishing characteristics they ask about. John Schmidt's first job was dairy farming on his family's dairy farm. He became a lumberjack after that. The lumber industry was big in Maine, especially with paper mills and stuff like that. The lumber industry was huge. Where I remember them living was the farm on the hill. I have no idea how he proposed. Don't know what his first impression of my grandmother was. His hometown memories, none of them. Don't know his favorite activities. For either one of them. Don't know their memories of their parents, nothing. Or memories of school, nothing. I didn't put Charles Mitchell's siblings here, I put John Schmidt's siblings for the siblings only because I actually know about his siblings and actually knew them, with the exception of Frank and Artie. So these are the people I grew up with. So that's why I put them. It wasn't an insult to Grandpa Mitchell. It was just, I mean, I know he had Aunt Phoebe, Uncle Almond. I'd have to look. But those are the two that come to mind first. But John Schmidt had Mary, who had 3 boys: Calvin, Eric, anyway, Aunt Edna, who never married. She was an old spinster. I'm not saying that to be rude. I'm just saying that because that's what I would have called her. She took care of her brother. You know, she took care of her. You know, her family on the farm. She just, that's what she did. It's what made her happy. You know. Uncle Frank married, had a daughter. Uncle Artie never married. There were rumors that Uncle Artie may have batted for the other team. I really don't care if he did or he didn't. But that's what I've heard through family grapevine, is that Uncle Artie may have batted for the other team. Who cares? They cared back then. Let's see. My paternal grandmother was Angelina Hemingway. I am named for her. She was born June 18th, 1912, right here in Douglas. Childhood home, right here in Douglas. Her typical family characteristics: she spoke French. Her first job was as a maid. I think her favorite pastime or favorite hobby was cooking. She just loved it. Her siblings were David Albert, who had Dorothy Ann, Delia, or Ida Delia, who didn't have any children. Her and Uncle Dick, I guess they weren't able to have children. And Aunt Josephine, who family lore says was pregnant, beaten by her husband, lost her baby late in pregnancy from a beating, and was never able to become pregnant again. This is what family lore says. I have a sneaking suspicion that over here, and this is the reason why I would really like to know more about these, is I have the sneaking suspicion that this was her son. But anyway, I'll figure it out one of these days. I haven't found his birth certificate yet, or at least her stepson. Let's see. So, and I have absolutely no earthly idea how to answer any of these questions about my grandfather. He was Robert Wilson Sr., Bob. He was said to be a gentleman, like an old-fashioned gentleman. Take your hat off when you come in, open a door for a lady, just an old-fashioned gentleman. He was born in Broadbrook, Connecticut, 12/12/1900, December 12th, 1900. And that's where his childhood home was. His activities: dancing and playing pool. My grandfather was a trick shot at pool, and he was a beautiful barroom dancer. And it wants to know my memories of him. None. He passed before I was born, and it also wants to know the home I remember of them. And that's when that's what they wanted to know. And any memories. None. He passed before I was born, and Grammy died in a nursing home when I was 5.5. So there was no home. Once again, pastimes, dancing and playing pool. His siblings were Florence, born 1896. Aunt Florence and Uncle George didn't have children. Uncle James, born 1898, he had James and, oh, for Criper's sake, her name begins with an M. Anyway, I can't remember her name. Then Aunt Mabel had Lorraine and Carol. Uncle Bill had Bill, Shirley, and David. Or Shirley, Bill, and David. Uncle Bill was the baby, by the way. Okay. This had me confused. First of all, I messed up paternal and maternal. So I had to cross them out and write them above them. Excuse me. Because everything was written in cursive, and for some reason I looked at it quick and I thought it said paternal. Because I assumed paternal was going to be before maternal. But they do it the opposite in this book. That's what it was. I just assumed, ask you me, that paternal would be before maternal, which in most cases it is. But anyway, so I did my paternal first. Parmelia Bordeaux and David Hemingway. She was born in, what the heck? She was, oh, they were married in Sturbridge, Massachusetts. She was born in 1880 in Taftville, Connecticut, which is a village in Norwich. He was born in 1869 in Vermont, Albert. Okay. Now, on my mother's side, Hazel Dyer and Edson Cox, both born in Maine. I don't have their date and exact places of birth. No clue about hometown memories there. Other ancestors. I went with my great grandparents on my mother's side. Well, it's mother's ancestors. I haven't done my father's yet. Oh no. Oh my god. I did this wrong. Okay. This should have been Grammys. Okay. Oh my god. Okay, these should have been Grammy's parents. Oh. And Grampy's parents. No, these are Grampy. No. Anyway. Hazel and Edson. Let me move on. Okay. Other ancestors on mother's side. Frank Dyer. He is my great grandfather. No, my great-great-grandfather, sorry. And his wife Josephine Farrington, my great-great-grandmother. He died in 1918 due to appendicitis in Lewiston. She died in 1901, and we know nothing more. We found them on census records. And then I can add more, but I just haven't done, I didn't do dads for whatever reason. Okay, here we go. Family stories and anecdotes. Okay. Keep in mind that some of this is smudged because of my left-handedness. Let's see. Stories about you. One time, so I'll tell you the story without reading it. We were in the Lincoln Mall in Lincoln, Rhode Island. And I walked up to a mannequin, standing in the window. I patted her on the bum. I was probably about, 5. And I said, "Hey, Daddy, come feel this. This is really soft." The mannequin started laughing. She was a real person. Actually, 2 of the mannequins started laughing. My father turned more shades of red than I even knew existed. It was so funny. Anecdotes about family occasions. I grew up with my cousins very much like my brothers. I've told you that. And my mother and my uncle would make big pots of spaghetti and spaghetti sauce for all of us to eat when we would have a meal together, because let's face it, it's expensive. Even back then, in the early 80s, it was expensive to feed 5 kids and 3 adults. That's 8 mouths. So they would make sauce. My uncle's sauce is outrageous, and so is my mother's, because they wouldn't use a can of sauce. They would make sauce. They would make their own meatballs. They would make sweet and hot sausages. I mean, oh my goodness. So that's one of my best memories, and I remember sitting on the floor with the boys, because there just wasn't enough room when we were all there, to all sit at the table. It just wasn't. So the boys and I would sit on the floor, and I remember one time one of us had pushed a sausage to the side because it was a hot sausage, and we didn't eat the hot sausage because we were little, and I never got a taste for it. And so my uncle and my dad would come by and grab it with their fork off the side of our plate. It rolled onto the floor. One of them still grabbed it, because my mother's floor was so clean you could literally eat off of it. So it was not an issue. Aunt. And this is anecdotes about family holidays. Auntie Edie was the only one that would come and stay with us. She would come for Christmas. She would come for Thanksgiving. When I was little, she was there every year. And she would come in the summer. In fact, I remember her walking to school, picking me up on the last day of school in 5th grade. And I introduced her to my teacher. And we looked at the map, and we showed him on the map where she lived in Connecticut and stuff. And it was neat. And we would also visit my Uncle David on Christmas. Generally speaking, when I was little, they lived right there. So it was just a matter of walking across the driveway or up the stairs. When they moved, we still would take a ride down there. As long as the weather was good, we would take a ride down, to where they lived and visit with them for a little while. after dinner, you know. And we'd play with our toys together and stuff like that. It's anecdotes about family pets. Okay, here goes. Now, we had Freshie, the cat, and oh, Freshie was my mother's baby. I loved that cat too, though. He used to sleep on my feet at night. He was my foot warmer. And he really didn't seem to have a favorite, you know. He loved us all. He had a hairball one night, so Mom let him outside to throw up, and she never saw him again. She was out calling for him. About a month later, I came home from school. Mom sitting on the step, and she told me that the neighbor had told her that when he came home from work, which he worked nights, he accidentally hit Freshie and killed him. But instead of coming to our door and saying, "Would you like to bury your cat?" he threw him in the dumpster and never mentioned it. So my mother had to tell me this when I came home from school, and I just remember laying my head in her lap and crying. That was my cat. And it wasn't long after that we found our place in Northbridge, which was beautiful. In fact, he redid it, and when he redid it, he redid the bedroom for me, my bedroom for me, with wallpaper that was like these beautiful pink roses, because he knew how much I wanted a pink girly room. So he did it for me, you know, which was really kind of cool. And I loved it. Absolutely loved it. And it was very much a teenage room, the way I had it set up. I had the dresser that I have now, but it had its mirrors still. Unfortunately, the mirror, as I mentioned in my other video, the mirror got put in the basement of our first house in Manchog and kind of got ruined. Actually, both of the mirrors from our dressers did, because they wouldn't fit in the upstairs room because it came to a peak. Like that. Just that much in the middle. Literally, that much in the middle. So, yeah. I don't know how I got from... Oh, I know why. Because when we moved in there, his cat was pregnant. And he had learned what happened to my cat. He said, "Would you like one of my cat's kittens?" Yeah, absolutely. So we took the kitten. Yeah. He was born in the summer, and he was given to us in September, I want to say. And the landlord brought him over. Mom was at work, and he was in a little box. And I brought him in the living room, you know, the box. I set it down. I went to pick him up, and I couldn't quite hold him. I dropped him, or he jumped out of my hands, and he ran and got under my bed, all the way to the back. My father and I tried to coax him out of there. We couldn't coax him out of there. My mother finally got him when she got home from work. You know, we told her we tried. Poor thing is scared, you know. And that was my puppy. And I told her I named him. And then he got nicknamed Puff or Puffalump. And he responded to all three. Puffy, Puff, Puffalump. I think Dad nicknamed him Puffalump. I called him Puffy because when I looked at him, That's what he looked like. He had this giant head and this puffy body of just fur. He was just this ball of fur when I picked him up out of that box. When I looked down at him in the box, I just saw these giant green eyes looking up at me. He was a Maine Coon. His father was ginormous. We babysat his father on a couple of occasions. I'm not sure his father knew he was his father, but but his father was ginormous. That's where he got his size from. Because he became a ginormous cat. He weighed 26 pounds. He had 24-inch waist. He was 3 feet from tip of tail to tip of nose, which is a huge cat. Midnight weighed 17 pounds. He was all muscle. We got him within 6 months of getting Puffy. So they became brothers, even though Midnight was a part Burmese, mostly Burmese. He had been a barn cat, and the vet said, I'm going to have to put this poor cat down unless somebody takes him. And our friend who's friends with the vet, brought him to our house. And my father took one look at him and said, Midnight. He said, when I was young, I had a cat that was a black cat who was named Midnight. This cat is being named Midnight. And we're keeping him. We had no idea she was coming with this cat. And the vet said, the vet had said to our friend, if you find someone who will take this cat, so I don't have to put this cat down, because I don't want to put this cat down. There's no reason to. It was just a kitten. And I will treat this cat for free for life to not have to put it down. And so she, for free, neutered both of our cats. Midnight's original name on his, because we had his papers. We actually had papers for him. Wish I still had those papers. They were locked in the lockbox. I don't know what happened to his papers. His original name on his papers was Peter. Peter. Really? For a cat? So. Anyway, that's. And Midnight had pica, which is common in cats. It's where you, and people get it too. It's a disorder where for some reason you chew on and eat things that are not technically edible. Like, oh, I don't know, midnight Christmas lights. I was playing my keyboard, and it was kind of broken, and I wanted a new one, so I was making a little video for my parents back when I had the VJEXY camcorder. And I caught Midnight on camera, evidently. I did not realize I had caught him on camera until I showed my parents the video. My mother said, oh, you caught him. I did? Oh, I did. Biting down on the Christmas lights. Now, these lights were the light bulb, and around the light bulb had this plastic flower. I have not seen those bulbs, those particular Christmas lights since then. I don't know. Like I said, this was early 90s. Anyway, they were unique. I think they were old then. And he bit down. Wouldn't you know it, he blew out the entire tree. Well, my mother was able to replace the controller bulb and get the tree lit again. But I see him kind of going like this, and then I hear crunch, and the tree goes out. Oh no! So, and I wasn't at that moment worried that, oh gee, the tree went out. My first concern was for the cat. Was, oh my God, he's got a mouthful of sharp plastic. So I wasn't even concerned about the tree at that moment. I just got up, ran over to him, And good thing this is the sweetest cat ever. Because with a lot of cats, you couldn't do what I did. Which was that I opened his mouth with my hand and did the scoop like you do the scoop and sweep method if somebody has thrown up and they're unconscious and you need to clean their mouth out. Well, I used the same technique to make sure I got all the plastic out of his mouth. And with a lot of cats, you'd get your finger bit off, but he wouldn't even have dreamed of biting. That just wasn't midnight. So I was able to open his mouth and, like I said, scoop and sweep, make sure that all the plastic got out of his mouth. That was my main concern. He didn't appreciate it, don't get me wrong, but he didn't even dream of biting. So, that just wasn't him, and I knew it was safe to do that. With Puff, I might have hesitated for a sec, but I don't think he would have bit me doing that either. I mean, Mom was able to open Midnight's mouth and look at his tooth without any issue. Stuck her finger in his mouth and rubbed booze on his tooth. The freaking cat loved the booze. That's what was so funny about that. He broke a canine with his pica. That was years later. So, yeah, the Christmas tree. Like I said, it's a very good thing that he wasn't that kind of an animal, and you could take it out of his mouth and make sure he was safe. Because I didn't want that to cut up his mouth. That was my focus. That was my thought. I heard the crunch, saw the tree go out, and freeze out. Nothing I can do about that, but I need to check on my cat. You know, and I think that's the right way to respond to that. And Puffy had asthma. Oh, it was terrible. I remember he would climb up on my bed, and he would, when he was having issues with his asthma, he would put I had my desk by my bed. I had a small lift-up desk, a student desk, and he would get up on my bed and he would put his chin up on the desk to raise his head, and that's how he would go to sleep when he was having problems with his asthma. When he was a kitten, my mother didn't know how long he'd live. When he got a little bit older, had some hefty vet bills, and they said he has kidney disease, which is common in male cats, and he probably won't live to be 5 years old. A cat lived to be 20. So I think Dr. Lopez would have been absolutely dumbfounded that he lived to be that age. But they did make kitty food for his kidneys. They started making kitty food for that during the urinary tract, and it worked. And I highly recommend it for your male cats. He eventually developed, as a 20-year-old cat, he developed cancer, he developed dementia, not sure how well he could see, had arthritis, couldn't jump, but I loved that cat. Stories your mother tells about your father. She always told me what a gentleman he was, especially when they were younger. Stories your father would tell you about your mother. My father always said how smart my mother was, how talented my mother was. And in spite of what my mother believed, my father actually, like I said, he thought she was smart, that she was talented. He thought she could do anything. And he told me on more than one occasion that she was beautiful. These are things she didn't know. And she used to tell me my father was handsome, but I knew my father was handsome. My father was very handsome. Let's see. Stories about your aunts and uncles. My Uncle David and my Uncle Richard were always there for me from the time I was born. I remember one time I was in the hospital. I guess I didn't want to be there anymore. I was little, like a toddler, maybe even littler. And I remember I was in a crib, you know, some stuffed toys and stuff in the crib. And my dad and my uncle came to visit me. I guess my mother and my aunt had been there all day, and my dad and my uncle came to visit me, and I just started throwing my toys at them out of the crib. And it's funny, they remember that too. I was surprised I remembered it. And I said, why did I do that? I said, I don't think you wanted to be there anymore. You wanted to come home with us, you know. And I remember my Uncle David picking me up from school when I was in kindergarten, because he lived with us at the time, and he would walk up to the school and get me and walk me home, and he would hold my little hand, and I just, that's precious to me, you know. My Uncle Richard, he gave me a whole set of ET cards, which would be worth a fortune right now if I still had them. They were unfortunately in the basement of the other house. He gave me a beautiful softball mitt, and I started playing softball. My uncle gave me my big wheels. He actually gave me the money. Excuse me. When I was baptized, he would take me outside. And every time he took me outside, he would give me a couple more dollars. And it was for my big wheels, which is my baptism gift from him. So let's see. I don't really have any memories of my aunts on Dad's side. My Aunt Edie on my mother's side was my favorite auntie, you know. My Uncle Dale on my mom's side, I very much grew up with, because he was only 11 when I was born. So I adored him. He was, on that side, he was my favorite. Because you have to remember, my other uncle on that side was very ill, mentally. And so he was also very disabled. So he wasn't able to, mentally, able to really be an uncle, you know. He loved me, no doubt. I loved him. I still do. As far as I know, he's still alive. I haven't heard anything, but why would I? Auntie Barbara, we would go there in the summer, celebrate my birthday with my cousin Bobby Joe. She was almost exactly 2 years younger than me. She was born August 12th, I was born August 4th. She was 176, I was 174. So, trying to think. I didn't really know Auntie Liz very well. And Auntie Edie, she was the one that was there the most. She was there summertime, she was there for holidays, she was there. She was the one that was there for my graduations, for 6th grade, for high school, all that stuff. When my father was sick, she sat by his side. When my mother was sick, she was at the hospital. You know, so, yeah, she was the one that was there. Let's see. Let's see, stories about your grandparents. My grandfather, on my father's side, lived with my parents. My parents were getting ready to get married, and my mom had moved into Dad's house, well, Dad's apartment, to take care of it and stuff, because my dad was on the road so much as a steeplejack. And so my grandmother said, since you guys are getting married, you're moving into the house, can you take Bob out of the nursing home and take care of him? Would you mind doing that? And my mother said, no. Because my father couldn't do it. First of all, my father was on the road working. That would leave my grandfather home alone, which would be dangerous. Because my grandfather had dementia, and my grandfather had a drinking problem, So yeah, it would not have been good, and so did my father then. It would not have been a good thing. And they didn't get along whatsoever. So yeah, it would have been terrible. And my mother said, sure, I can do that. So my mother would take care of my grandfather. And so my parents brought him home, and my mother's taking care of him. And my grandfather tried to help her. Sometimes he thought she was his first wife and he didn't like her. I don't know what happened between my grandfather and my father's first wife. They were only married for 11 months, for goodness sake. So I can't even imagine. But anyway, so my grandfather tried to help her do the dishes. He did it in cold water. My grandfather, I don't know, he thought he was cooking, I guess. Turned on all the burners on the stove and filled the house with gas. So yeah, that was just great. He turned on the oil, something to do with the oil, filled the house with oil. That was a mess. The gas was, not liquid, I don't think. So he filled it with like gas fumes. But the oil was actual liquid oil that he filled the house with. My mother said, what a mess to clean that. Oh my gosh, what a mess. And my grandfather would leave the house. My grandfather had severe arthritis. He would crawl down the hill. And my mother would go to the bar and say, do not serve Mr. Wilson. And they didn't listen, of course. But, because my grandfather was in rough shape, from his arthritis to his dementia and everything else. He didn't need booze on top of it. And it was awful. My grandfather would go crawling down the hill, and my mother would be like, oh, Mr. Wilson! And sometimes he would literally run away from home, and my mother would have to call the police. And the police knew Mr. Wilson was in rough shape, so they would go looking for him. He was 72 years old, and they would go looking for him, and they would bring him home, and because even though they didn't take missing persons seriously back then, they knew that this man was 72 years old and in rough shape. He had heart issues. He had severe arthritis to the point where he'd have to crawl. He was just dementia and all that. So they would look for him, because of his situation. And so they would bring him home. And he would call my grandmother at the nursing home. She's trying to poison me. My grandmother would be like, Bob, she's not trying to poison you. She is putting your heart medication in your food because you won't friggin' take it. So, and when my grandmother would come home on weekends, she did that even after I was born. She would sit on my grandfather's hat because my grandfather wouldn't leave the house without his hat. So, yeah, fun. So, yeah, that's all husband stuff. Yikes. Okay. Yeah. Husband stuff. Husband stuff. Yeah, this is all husband stuff. Back here, I wrote my tree. This is a tree. The front tree actually was started, as I mentioned at the beginning of the video. You can barely see it. So I did the back tree. Let's see. I will read you this, and then I will end this vlog because this vlog has become an hour long. It's going to take me forever to upload it. My parents, Ella Courier Mitchell, Robert Wilson Jr., there's me, then there's and once again I screwed it up, great-grandfather Edson Cox, great-grandmother Hazel Dyer, great-grandmother Nettie Plant, great-grandfather Walter Mitchell, under Fleda Cox and Charles Mitchell, but I also have John Schmidt, whose father was John Schmidt, mother was Mamie Schultz, or Mary Schultz. My aunts and uncles, I included both sides here. Barbara, Edith, Merle, Elizabeth, Dale, Janice, Noreen, Norman, Josephine, Charles Jr. Then my cousins, I didn't get them all, but Bobby, Joe, Everett, Tiger, which is Glendon Jr., Brianna, Travis, Jesse, Norman Jr., Dale, and my Aunt Janice's daughter. And then there's my other aunt's daughters and sons, sisters, my half-sister Susan, who was adopted. I have two nieces, one of which passed away. Let's see. My great-grandfather on my father's side is Thomas Wilson, and my great-grandmother's Patience Burgess. My grandparents were Robert Wilson Sr. and Angelina Hemingway. My grandmother's parents were Pamelia Bordeaux and David Hemingway. And my father's siblings were David Thomas, Teresa, Richard, Barbara, and Florence. Cousins: Renee, Lisa, David Allen, Dennis, Sabrina, Jenny, Linda Jean, Richie, Lisa, Ray, Kenny, Norman D, Elton Jr., and Cheryl. I think I got them all on that side. I think I got them all. I didn't get them all on my mother's side because there's way too freaking many of them. There are, in here, there are little, and I haven't really read, but here in the beginning, it just sort of talks about just some advice. So this is the thrift store. I'm very happy with it. Thank you for joining me for this epic genealogy video. Didn't realize it was going to be this long, but it was fun. I told stories and stuff. Excuse me. If you could find a record book like this would be something great to write up and leave your kids, or write up and like wrap it up and give it to your kids as Christmas present. If I had a kid, I would do that. You know, and you could put pictures in it, tape pictures, or glue pictures down in it, which is actually a great idea. So, because there are places for pictures, and you can do that right there, for example, and give it to your kids as a Christmas present, you know, or give it to a family member as a Christmas present. It would be great if, like, I'm one kid. If my mother had filled this out, she would have filled it out about her and dad. The husband would have been dad, and then the child would have been me, and, you know, it would have looked a little different, which is the way I should have filled it out, as if I were mom. But I didn't. So, you know, it's awful. On my mother's side, I don't even know the names of all my cousins. Because there's so many. My Aunt Sue that we found had 3. Auntie Barbara had 3. Auntie Edie has a stepson. I'm trying to think. Auntie Liz had 2. Uncle Dale had 1. And then you go on to Charles Mitchell's kids. Janice had 2. I cannot think of her daughter's name. Charles didn't have any. Uncle Norman had 2. Aunt Noreen had like 6. Aunt Josephine had like 6. So I have a bazillion cousins. So, to name them all is not possible. Unless I literally look at the genealogy and there isn't room in that book to name them all. Like I said, on the Wilson Hemingway side, because my father's sisters belonged to his mother but didn't belong to his father. Not that it mattered, but that's why I say the Hemingway side. I know who their kids are. You know what I mean? So it's pretty easy. But I am going to, like I said, end this vlog here. I'm going to continue with this investigation into Conrad Brisson. I have 2 postcards from this kid. One of them says something about Aunt Corinne. This was June 9th, 1929. Pretty sure that's June in French. I don't know what the date on this one is. But anyway. And it says place stamp here, which means they were handed to someone. They weren't mailed, even though they come from a... Okay, this is February 29th, 1928. Come from a school. This is 3/27/29, except that's not the date on the back of it. That's the date the picture was taken, evidently. They were handed to someone. They were not mailed. Because there's no postage on them. So, but I am going to figure that out. And I'll keep you posted on that. Thank you for joining me. Have a wonderful rest of your day. I hope you stayed with me. I know this was a long one. God bless you. I will see you next time. Please click like, subscribe, and all that good stuff. And I do want to figure out how to put that down here so I don't have to keep repeating myself like a broken record. Bye, guys.